Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty complex text, Esoteric Treatise of Hermetic Astrology by Samael Aun. We're going to use it to outline a very specific Gnostic path to what the author calls awakening. So, right out of the gate, the text hits you with this startling claim, a real bombshell that challenges our entire perception of reality. It's setting up the core problem right here, that our normal, everyday, waking life, what this text calls the vigil state, is actually just another kind of dream. I mean, that's a pretty radical idea to start with, right? So let's unpack what that actually means. All right, so building on that quote, the first part of this whole system is really about diagnosing the human condition. It's framing all of us, basically, as a fundamentally sleeping humanity. To really hammer this point home, the source uses this very specific and kind of provocative term for us in our default state, the intellectual animal. Now, this isn't meant as an insult, it's a diagnosis. The idea is that our lives are mostly driven by mechanical habits and a fractured inner self, and we're doing it all while living in this deep, dreamlike state without even realizing it. Okay, and this is where it gets really visual. This philosophy uses an analogy. Think of consciousness as a four-story house. The text argues that the intellectual animal only ever lives on the bottom two floors. The first floor? That's just normal sleep, when your body rests and your ego dreams. The second floor is the vigil state. That's our waking life, where the body is up and moving, but our mind, our ego, just keeps on dreaming internally. The two top floors, self-consciousness and objective consciousness, well, they're basically empty, unused. So if the diagnosis is that we're all asleep, then what's the alarm clock? What's the cure? This next part of the path lays out the very first steps you'd need to take to even begin the process of waking up. And what's so interesting here is that the first step isn't about learning some secret mantra or a special technique. Nope. According to this text, it all starts with a really profound internal realization. You have to first fully comprehend, really accept that you are asleep. It's only from that moment of recognition that the real work can even begin. And this is where we get to the practical how-to side of things. The system gives you this exercise called the division of attention. It's a three-part practice meant to jolt you out of that dream state, moment to moment. First up, the subject. You have to maintain an inner awareness, constantly remembering, I am here. Then, the object. You observe the world around you, but without getting totally lost and hypnotized by it. And finally, place. You have to rigorously question your surroundings. What is this place? Why am I here? The whole point of doing all three is to break the spell of just living on autopilot. All right, let's move on to the next stage. And this is where things get really deep, really esoteric. The text presents this as the core secret to creating a totally new kind of being. So this brings us right to the heart of the entire system. And it revolves around this concept of being born again. But let me be clear, we're not talking symbolically here. According to this text, this is a very specific and very real transformative process. So how does this second birth actually happen? Well, the text says the key is a practice called mythuna, which it defines as a kind of sexual alchemy. The core idea is that sexual energy is this incredibly powerful creative force. So the goal here is to consciously transmute that energy instead of just expelling it. Why? To awaken a latent power that the text calls the kundalini, or the sacred fire. And the whole purpose of this alchemical work is to do something pretty extraordinary. Create what the author calls solar bodies. See, the idea is we're all born with these default lunar bodies. They're seen as these basic protoplasmic vehicles that are subject to all the mechanical laws of nature, just like an animal. The whole point of the work is to build these superior crystalline solar vehicles inside yourself. These are what's needed to house a fully awakened consciousness. And that transformation, that's what the text actually means by the second birth. But hold on, it's not over yet. You'd think achieving a second birth would be the finish line, right? Well, not quite. The text introduces one last, absolutely critical challenge that has to be faced. And here's the final twist. Even after creating these solar bodies, the twice-born person still has to deal with their old, fragmented self. The text calls this the pluralized I. The idea here is that your ego isn't just one single thing. It's a legion of tiny, separate I's. Your anger, your pride, your envy. And each one is described as being like a little bottle that has a piece of your true consciousness trapped inside it.
This leads to a super critical question, and the text has a very specific answer. What are the consequences of this internal division? What happens when a person has both the new, shiny solar bodies and the old, messy lunar ego?
The text warns of a very specific kind of failure, which results in a being called a Hanamugian. This is described as this paradoxical creature with a double center of gravity. It's literally one half angel and one half beast, trapped in the same body. According to the author, this is a total failure of the great work. The final crucial task is to completely dissolve that ego to avoid this state. And this finally brings us to the ultimate goal of the entire path, the culmination of all this intense work, as described in this esoteric system.
The text wraps up by describing the final state of a fully realized being, a resurrected master. This is someone who has not only achieved that second birth, but has also finished the incredibly difficult job of eliminating the ego entirely. And the result? A being with total mastery over their inner and outer worlds, symbolized by these extraordinary powers like controlling the elements and, yes, even transmuting physical lead into physical gold.
So, from the initial diagnosis of a sleeping humanity, all the way to this incredibly arduous path of resurrection, this text lays out a radical map for inner transformation, and it leaves us with a question that echoes that very first challenge to our reality, asking us to seriously consider, what does it truly mean to stop dreaming?